ready to start.
Oh, you ready? Did you say you were ready to start, Irene? Is that what you said?
Yes.
All right. All right, then. Well, let's start with welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving. I sure did. And as long as I'm at it, let's just get my screen ready. Did y'all see this last night? Pretty cool. Been hearing that was a solar eclipse. Just thought I'd share that with you for a second. And next up, let's talk about today's agenda. I'm going to teach APDaily video 5.7. The way this is going to work is we're going to take a good look at the video. Given that we have a semester final exam coming up, I'll not only teach the video, but I'm going to use this as an opportunity to ask a number of questions that should allow you to think back to various parts of the year and see if we can't tie this all together. In other words, can we use this video also as a way to review for that semester exam? So having said that, let me now go to AP Classroom and go to the video election of 1860 and secession. All right.
Daily,
so
topic 5.7, the election of 1860 and secession. Today in this video, we'll be examining why Lincoln's victory in the election of 1860 was a tipping point for Southern secession. My name is Dan Chung. I am the AP teacher over at Hightstown High School in Hightstown, New Jersey.
All right. So right now, what all of you should have out are your key questions, and especially question number 27. Dan here is going to work through for us the question, what was the election of 1860? Now, I'm going to tell you from the outset, I think Dan does a very good job with this. On the other hand, I will share with you, and Dan, if you're watching, I hope you'll understand the spirit of this. I believe Dan goes into way too much detail at certain points. In other words, he's going to try to put stuff before you that you're just not going to need to know, and I'm going to draw your attention to that. What I'd be curious about is when I do that, if it is in your textbook, take a look and share. Dan's going to say it's super important. I'm going to say, no, I don't think it is. Feel free to follow up, and if you want to play it safe, it's not complicated. He does a nice job of explaining what I'm going to say you don't need to know. And you make your own call as to what you want to focus on and whether or not you need to learn it. But let's go ahead and get started here.
So what are we going to learn today? Key concepts. Lincoln's victory in the election of 1860 was achieved without any Southern electoral votes. After a series of contested debates about secession, most slave states voted to secede from the Union, precipitating the Civil War.
All right. So let's just start right here with this. I personally would have liked for Dan to have explained more about this key concept having to do with electoral college votes. I believe there's an assumption here that many of you know what this is, and I'm not so sure that's such a safe assumption. So, at the risk of telling you what you already need to know, let's make very clear that we understand. Let me try to make very clear what this is all about, this point that there was no Southern electoral votes for Lincoln in the election of 1860. We've just gone through an election. And perhaps you have learned from this election, and if not, here we go. The American people do not decide who becomes the president of the United States. The American people get to vote for who becomes the president, but somebody else actually decides. To back this out a little bit, during the Constitutional Convention that we've spent so much time talking about, the delegates came to Philadelphia, and some thought that the American people should have the power to decide who's going to become the president. They should vote and have their vote make the ultimate decision. Others said, oh, no, you cannot trust the common man with that all-important responsibility, but you can trust politicians, lawmakers, members of Congress, people who've proven themselves as qualified to deal with these heady decisions. So there was this debate, and as we learned, many debates at the Constitutional Convention, they were compromised. And back then, the compromise was that the American people would not decide, that the lawmakers would not decide, but a handful of selected individuals, what we call electors, who, when coming together, create something called the Electoral College. So, Joe Biden was voted the more popular candidate, but that doesn't mean he's the president. You cannot call him the president of the United States right now. He will only be able to be called the president when the electors do that, and that will be in January. And so here we go. Lincoln did win the majority of the vote, but really officially doesn't become president until the electors decide that. And there wasn't one from the South who voted in favor of Lincoln. That's the point he's making here.
I thought that Biden already got the popular votes.
And I'm really glad you asked that question, Irene. Biden did get the popular vote, but do you see how simply because he got the popular vote, we cannot refer to Joe Biden as President Biden right now. He's not. He's President-elect Biden. He will not be able to be officially declared the president until the Electoral College votes for him. And the Electoral College, theoretically, not that they're going to, but theoretically, those people who call themselves electors, who are selected by the states, you apply for it. I've applied for it. No, I didn't get it, but I applied for it.
No, but that means then Biden would not be 100% chance to be our president.
Say it again, please.
Then Biden would not have a 100% chance to become our president.
Well, I'm not so sure I understand the point you're making. Are you saying that right now we cannot officially guarantee that he will become the president? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
In essence, yeah, you're right. That determination isn't official until the electors vote. Now, true, the electors almost always vote for the person who received the majority of the vote. Not always. Once in a while, we have an elector that doesn't go that route. But generally speaking, the Electoral College votes for the one who got the majority of the vote. All right.
So let's take a look at how we got here. A little context for the election of 1860. The nation's growing in size right now, and the issue of slavery is going to divide the nation. It is all going to come to a head heading into the election of 1860. Some of the key events that you should know about would be the Compromise of 1850, the Kansas-Nebraska Act, the Dred Scott decision, the Lincoln-Douglas debates, as well as John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry.
I really like what Dan does here. We've been doing it all semester. The point I've made over and over again, you cannot talk about the past unless you contextualize that story, unless you provide some background to that story. You talk about what came before. I love his selection of things. We went over each and every one of these in the week leading up to the Thanksgiving break. One reason why I stress the importance of the Compromise of 1850 and the Kansas-Nebraska Act, as well as the other things that he has appearing here on this slide. It is very, very important for you when talking about this election of 1860 to be able to describe these things that led up to it.
Who's running in the election of 1860? We have Stephen Douglas and John C. Breckinridge representing the Democrats. Abraham Lincoln is going to get the Republican nod, and John Bell is going to represent the third party Constitutional Union Party.
Now, Dan may be correct in suggesting that you need to know who Lincoln ran against. I'm not so sure about that. I believe the most important thing to take away from this particular topic is what did Lincoln believe when running for president as it relates to the issue of slavery. But he's going to now spend a little bit of time trying to explain to us what Douglas and Breckinridge believed and what Bell believed. In the process, he'll also share with us what Lincoln believed. Let's just go ahead and take a look at it. Again, I don't think you'll ever be called upon to show who Lincoln ran against, much less what those people believed in. But in the event I'm wrong, let's see what he has to say.
So as you
Still
can imagine,
included in my answer?
I don't think you need to, Irene. No, I think you'd be safe to leave it out, but it isn't a lot to include in if you want to play it safe. So really your call.
The fact that the Democratic ticket is split, it is going to put them at a slight disadvantage. Stephen Douglas was originally the front runner, you would imagine, for southern states. However, most of his support will come from the north. His overcommitment to the idea of popular sovereignty during the Lincoln-Douglas debates is really going to hurt, I guess, his support from the South. Namely, you just want to remember the Freeport Doctrine. Breckinridge is going to garner most of his support from the South. He is an advocate for slavery and states' rights.
Now, I just do not think the Freeport Doctrine is necessary here, but I do believe this concept of popular sovereignty is. We've talked about this many times, this argument being this, let the people themselves decide. And so clearly that's one of the major differences with Lincoln. We'll get to that in just, get to more of that in just a second.
Abraham Lincoln is running on the Republican ticket. He is running on a free soil platform. This is a really important term to know. It often comes up on the AP exam in some fashion. Free soilers believe in the non-extension of slavery. So they're not necessarily advocating for the abolishment of slavery at the moment. They're really looking to make sure that it doesn't go beyond its current borders.
All right, everybody, hands on the keyboard. I want to make absolutely certain we understand this point. Please send your answer to me privately. Here's my question to you. True or false, when Lincoln is running for president in 1860, Lincoln is telling the American people, vote for me and I will get rid of slavery. True or false? I want everybody in. I'm seeing a lot of you in. Keep going, keep going, keep going. If you don't have the answer, you can pass. So good. Now, about 80, 90% of you are saying false. This is what I was wanting to see. A few of you, true, question mark. The point to be made here is Lincoln is running on a free soil we call platform. What he is saying is in the new territories, if there's new territory, I don't want to see slavery there. No slavery there. But slavery can continue to exist where it already does exist. So this true-false concept is a little bit tricky, but the important point to be made here is he is not saying that he is going to abolish slavery everywhere. He's in essence saying to the South, I'm going to allow you to continue to have your slaves. And so the answer that I'm really looking for there is false, and I'm just seeing a couple of you sent in the, good, fine, great. So now let's go the next step.
And then you have the Constitutional Union Party, represented by John Bell. As you can imagine, based on the name, they're the party of law. And really, the law that they're referring to is going to be the Missouri Compromise. They're going to say that the states above the 3630 line are going to remain free, and the states below will remain slave states, just as stated in the Missouri Compromise. So let's take a look at the outcome. As you can see from this chart, Lincoln is the unanimous victor with 180 votes. Lincoln's victory in the election of 1860 is going to be a problem for southern states. He wins on this free soil platform without carrying one electoral vote from any of the southern states. As you can imagine, they're going to feel threatened. And in December of 1860, there's one last chance to try to resolve this issue, and it's with the Credendon Compromise. What this is proposing is to take the 3630 line from the Missouri Compromise and extend it from coast to coast. The fact that it's going to be built into the Constitution is going to federally protect slavery, which southern states are in support for. Lincoln will ultimately reject this, and it's really going to show both sides that lifestyles will not be able to coexist at this point.
And again, here, that credendum compromise, I don't think you'll need to know it. I'd be very curious if it's in your textbook. But no, I think that goes well beyond the content knowledge that you're going to have in order to be properly prepared for the exam. But here, this slide is where it gets really important. Let's listen up.
So the South's reaction to this is going to be drastic. In 1860, South Carolina is going to secede, followed by 5 other states. President Buchanan doesn't believe it's in his constitutional right to really do anything about this. In February of 1861, they're going to create the Confederate States of America, and they're going to appoint Jefferson Davis as president. And then in April of 1861, there's going to be that attack on the federal fort of Fort Sumter in Charleston, South Carolina. And this is ultimately going to mark the official starting point for the Civil War.
There we go. So now you know what the short and long-term effects are. And to make sure, in the chat box right now, when we talk about the election of 1860, please tell me privately, what was a short-term effect of the election of 1860? 3, 2, 1, send. All right. Keep going. There are only 10 of you there now. Everybody, if you don't have an answer with a question mark. Sure, 3, 2, 1. What was a short-term effect of the election of 1860? Yeah. So the answer that I'm looking for here is that southern states secede. The southern states secede. And I'd say about 30–40% of you watching the video have picked up on that. Now let's talk about those southern states. This election, short term, is going to cause them, the southern states, to leave the Union. They're going to create something called the Confederate States. Now, we've talked about the creation of a confederacy earlier on in the year. What I want to make sure is see that we have some understanding of what that term means. When the South secedes, they're going to create a form of government. In the chat box, if you will, right now, in one word, who in essence in this Confederate States of America, where Jefferson Davis is the president, who in essence is going to lead? And please don't say Jefferson Davis. In one word, who's going to be in charge, if you will? Who's going to have the greater say? Who's going to lead? To put it another way, who's going to rule? Let's try it that way. In one word, please. 3, 2, 1. I've got to pass. The South, keep going. Everybody else, citizens, slave owners. These are not the answers I'm looking for. Keep going. There we go. There's a couple of correct ones. Good. The wealthy, no. So guys, let's back this out again. All right, let's try it this way. Watch before I help you with the answer here. When the Confederacy is established, let's see if we can do it this way. These states walk away from what form of government? In other words, what kind of government did the Constitution create? In the chat box 3, 2, 1, let me see if you have that answer. They're going to try to create a confederacy, which means something different from what they had. Democracy is no, not the answer that I'm looking for. Somebody else, question mark. Democracy, no, keep going. A lot of question marks here, keep going. Pass. This is why we do this exercise. There you go, Mia. That's the word I'm looking for. Keep going. Anybody else? All right. So there we go. Sophia, technically correct, but what I'm looking at is simpler, guys. So let's go back to the Articles of Confederation. What we learned this back then. What kind of government did the Articles of Confederation create? If it helps you to recall that phrase, you know, sometimes who ruled and who drooled. Sometimes it's phrased in that way. And so does that help you? Who rules in a confederacy? Who has more power? Who has less power? Maybe if we phrase it that way. Can we do that now in the chat box? 3, 2, 1, send. Who has more power in a confederation? That's right, Matthew. That's what I'm looking for. That's right, Sierra. Now we've got it, Andrew. Keep going. Camden. Yeah, there we go. Madison. Now we're talking. So guys, there we are. I'm seeing it over again. No, not the president. Too many, no, not three branches of government. What we're getting at here, let's just make this a little easier now, is this a confederacy by definition, a confederacy, whether it's the Confederate States of America set up here in 1861, or whether it's the Articles of Confederation. The states will have more power than the federal government. They're going to have more power than the federal government. Now, what kind of government did the Confederate States walk away from? What kind of government was set up by the Constitution? The answer that I'm looking for is federal government. They walked away from a federal government to create a Confederate government. Now let's see if this helps to jog memory a little bit. What is that all-important word that we're going to need to use when we describe a federal government? In other words, what does the federal government and the state government, what do they do in terms of the word power? I'm looking for one word. What's the word they do in terms of power? 3, 2, 1. There you go, Irene. That's the word I'm looking for. Keep it going, please. Continue on. A lot of question marks here. Disperse. No, a lot of question marks. All right, so this is a good moment for all of us. Let's just make sure now, if we're writing down into the key questions, we've got to have this down. The southern states are going to create a confederacy. A confederacy, by definition, is where the state governments will have more power than the federal government, the national government. The Confederate States of America here, in this case, they walked away from a federal form of government. They walked away from a form of government where some powers are shared. Under a federal form of government, both the feds and the states can, for example, tax. They share some power. They can both, for example, have some kind of police force. California can have a police force. The national government, by way of the FBI, can have a police force. They share some power. But there are also certain powers they don't share. Like, for example, California can't declare war, but the federal government can. In any event, back to the key point here, 1861, the Confederacy, states had more power, walked away from a kind of government, federal, where power is shared. When it came to the Articles of Confederation, true or false, everybody, in the chat box, the Articles of Confederation were a form of government where the people living at that time walked away from a federal form of government. True or false? Where in other words, the government of England, where the states and the federal government shared some power. True or false? 3, 2, 1, send. Okay. Good. Well, so we're all over the place here. I have as many passes as I have trues, and I have as many passes as I have trues and I have falses. So the point there is, under the Articles, they walked away from what is called a unitary form of government. Unitary. And that goes back to something we learned, I think, what was it, 4th, 5th, 6th week of school or something like that. Under a unitary form of government, the national government, the federal government, has more power than the states. And so that's the bottom line point we're making here throughout this course. We're going to keep coming back to it over and over again. We'll talk about it when we talk about Franklin Roosevelt and so on. There are 3 forms of government. There's a Confederate form of government, a federal form of government, and a unitary. And here in 1861, Confederate states have more power, walked away from a federal form of government where some powers are shared. The Articles of Confederacy, created during the American Revolutionary War, also sought to create a form of government where the states have more power. But we walked away from the government of England, which is a unitary. Federal government has more power than the states. And that's it. That is all that we have in the video, other than Dan now does a very nice job from here on out teaching you guys how to write an LEQ, which is something that we spent considerably more time on second semester, how to do a thesis. Is a thesis and a claim the same thing? How to support your thesis and so on. And so that finishes this up for today. I'm going to stop the recording now and give you time to work on your PBLs.